The room is quiet in the way that only happens after midnight. Noah Rivers sits cross-legged on the floor of the living room, a toy car balanced carefully between his hands. He isn't playing. He's listening. Aisha notices that first, not the sound outside the door, but the way her son goes still. Children always know before adults admit the danger. The only light comes from the kitchen, casting a faint reflection across Noah's face. His eyes catch it. Too sharp. Too familiar. Aisha's breath tightens in her chest. Those eyes have haunted her for 7 years. Every morning. Every question she's avoided answering. Footsteps pass outside the apartment. Low. Deliberate. Not lost. Not hurried. Aisha moves without speaking. She kneels in front of Noah, hands firm on his shoulders, guiding him toward the hallway. "Hey," she whispers, steady but urgent. "We're playing the quiet game, okay?" Noah nods. He trusts her. That trust breaks her heart. Her phone vibrates in her pocket. One message. No number. "We found you." Her fingers go cold. The footsteps stop. Aisha counts. Seconds, not breaths. Breathing wastes time. She has one choice left. The one she promised herself she would never make. Her thumb hovers over a name she hasn't touched since the day she ran. Min-Jae. The knock doesn't come. The pressure does. She presses call. Seoul glows beneath floor-to-ceiling glass, a city arranged into order and obedience. Min-Jae stands alone in silence, jacket folded neatly over a chair, hands clasped behind his back. Nothing in this room moves without his consent. His phone rings. Private line. International. He answers without turning. "Aisha." Her voice is barely holding together. "I don't have time to explain. I just..." Sound breaks through the line. Child's breath. Controlled. Trying to be brave. Min-Jae turns slowly. "There's a boy," she says. "He's mine. He's yours." Silence stretches, sharp and dangerous. "He has your eyes," she adds. "And they're coming for us." The line goes dead. For the first time in years, Min-Jae does not move. Son. Not a rumor. Not leverage. A living consequence. He exhales once. "Trace the call," he says calmly, already reaching for his jacket. "Activate everything." The city below continues as normal. But something irreversible has begun. Noah had always been told he looked like his mother. The curl of his hair. The shape of his smile. The calm way he watched the world instead of rushing into it. Aisha held on to that idea the way people hold on to rails in the dark, because it made things simpler. But tonight simplicity was gone. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, the television muted, the room lit only by the streetlight slipping through the blinds. Noah rolled his toy car back and forth along the armrest. Careful, precise. He had always played like that. As if noise might break something. Aisha watched him without meaning to. It was the eyes. Not just the color. Deep, steady, almost too focused for a child his age. But the way they held still. The way they didn't flinch when the world shifted. She had seen that gaze once before, reflected in glass and polished steel, looking down at cities that bent around it. She looked away, her chest tightening. Noah glanced up. "Mom." "Yes, baby." "Why are you staring at me like that?" The question was gentle, curious, no accusation in it. Aisha crossed the space between them and knelt in front of him, smoothing her hand over his knee. "I was just thinking." "About work?" he asked. She almost laughed, almost cried. Something like that. Noah studied her face the way he always did when he sensed the truth was nearby but not fully reachable. Then his gaze drifted past her, toward the front door. "Someone was outside," he said. Aisha froze. "When?" "A little while ago." He shrugged. They walked slow. Her hand tightened without her realizing it. "Did you hear anything else?" "No," he hesitated. "But it felt heavy." Aisha swallowed. She'd spent years teaching him words for feelings most adults ignored. Trusting that instinct had kept them safe more than once. Tonight, it confirmed what her body already knew. She stood and locked the door. Checked the chain, the windows, everything in place, everything pretending to be normal. When she turned back, Noah was watching her again. That look. She crouched in front of him, level with his eyes. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. "When you look in the mirror, who do you think you look like?" He frowned, considering. "You," he said first, loyal as ever. "And?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Someone else too. I don't know who." Aisha closed her eyes. She remembered a different room years ago. A man standing in silence, hands behind his back, eyes unreadable. How those eyes had followed everything without revealing anything. How safe she'd felt, and how wrong that safety had been. She opened her eyes and saw them again. Not in a man. In her son. "Do you ever wonder about your dad?" she asked softly. Noah didn't answer right away. He rolled the car once more, then set it down carefully, as if choosing his words mattered. "I think he's far away," he said. "I think he watches things." Her breath caught. "What makes you think that?" Noah looked up. "Because when I watch people I feel like I already know them. And I think I learned that from him." The room felt smaller. Aisha reached out and pulled him into her arms, holding him tighter than usual. Noah relaxed against her, trusting, warm, real. Outside, somewhere down the street, a car door closed. Aisha felt the past lean closer. She pressed her lips to the top of Noah's head and whispered a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. "I won't let anyone take you from me." Noah nodded against her shoulder. But his eyes, those inherited, unyielding eyes, stayed open, fixed on the door, looking back at something that had already found them. Aisha had learned how to leave quietly long before she ever left him. Atlanta had been warm that summer, heavy with music and heat and conversations that lingered too long. She'd met Min-Jae at a fundraiser she hadn't wanted to attend, standing near a window like he didn't belong to the room or the city or the country. Everyone else spoke loudly, laughed too hard. He listened. "You look bored," she'd said, because she never learned how to pretend around men like him. He'd glanced at her, eyes sharp and assessing, then surprised her by smiling. "Just a little." "I am." They talked that night the way people do when neither is trying to win. About cities. About distance. About the strange comfort of being unknown. He never lied to her. But he never told her everything either. She'd felt that and chosen to stay anyway. Min-Jae had been careful. Always calm. Always composed. He never raised his voice. Never rushed. Men deferred to him without question, the way gravity pulls without sound. When he held her hand, it was steady, grounding. When he looked at her, it felt like being seen and measured at the same time. For months, she convinced herself that was enough. Then one night she followed him. Not because she suspected betrayal. Because she suspected omission. She'd watched from across the street as he stepped into a warehouse that wasn't on any map she recognized. Men waited for him there. Not friends. Not colleagues. Soldiers. The way they straightened when he entered told her everything her heart had been refusing to accept. She didn't go inside. She didn't need to. By morning she was gone. No note. No confrontation. Just absence. Min-Jae never came looking. Or maybe he did, quietly, and she never knew. Either way, she built a life on the idea that silence was mercy. That distance was protection. That some men were safer as memories. Then Noah came. The pregnancy had terrified her, but it also clarified everything. She told herself she was strong enough to carry the truth alone. That love didn't require proximity. That a child could grow whole without knowing where half of him came from. For 7 years that lie almost held. Now, sitting on the edge of her bed while Noah slept down the hall, Aisha felt the past unfold again, slow and relentless. She remembered Min-Jae's hands, how careful they'd been. How dangerous that care had felt in hindsight. Her phone rested face down beside her. She hadn't told Noah much. Just enough to answer his questions without opening doors she couldn't close. But tonight, she knew those doors were already moving. In Seoul, Han Min-Jae stood in a room built for command and realized how small control really was. He remembered Aisha vividly. Not as a mistake. As a fracture. She had looked at him like he could choose differently. That was what scared him most. He had told himself she left because she was afraid. He had never considered that she left because she was right. Now there was a boy with his eyes. A son who had grown up without his name, without his protection, without his shadow. A son who had learned to watch the world carefully, the way Min-Jae once had, because watching was how you survived. Min-Jae closed his eyes. For the first time, the life he'd built felt unfinished. Not threatened. Incomplete. Aisha lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to Noah's steady breathing through the wall. She pressed a hand to her chest, grounding herself. She had escaped a man. She had not escaped his consequences. And somewhere between the boy sleeping down the hall and the man standing in a city of glass, the truth waited, patient, unavoidable, and awake. The phone felt heavier in Aisha's hand than it should have. She stood in the kitchen with the lights off, the glow from the street slipping through the blinds in thin, broken lines. Noah was asleep now, finally, curled on his side with one arm tucked beneath his pillow, his breathing slow and even. She had waited for that rhythm before moving, before allowing herself to think. The name on her screen had not changed in 7 years. Min-Jae. No emoji. No surname softened for distance. Just a name that still carried weight in her chest. She told herself she was calling for information. For leverage. For time. That was a lie. She was calling because the danger had teeth now. Because silence no longer protected anyone. Because the truth, once buried, had begun to dig its way out. The phone rang once. In Seoul, Han Min-Jae had been reviewing reports he barely needed. Numbers that bent to his will. Names that moved when he spoke them. His office was quiet, the kind of quiet that came from obedience rather than peace. When his private line lit up, he frowned. The number was unfamiliar. The timing was not. He answered without greeting. There was breathing on the other end. Controlled. Measured. Like someone holding themselves together by force. Aisha, he said. She closed her eyes at the sound of her name in his voice. It hadn't softened. It hadn't hardened either. It was exactly as she remembered. Precise, restrained, dangerous in its calm. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't necessary, she said. I assumed, he replied. There was a pause. Not awkward. Waited. They know where we live, she continued. I don't know how much time we have. Min-Jae straightened slowly. Who is they? The kind of people you warned me about without ever warning me, she said. Not accusing. Just honest. Another pause. Longer this time. I can handle it, he said. You shouldn't have waited this long. She almost laughed. Almost broke. There's more, she said. In the background, a sound slipped through the line. Unmistakable. Child's breath. Min-Jae's hand tightened around the phone. What was that? He asked. Aisha swallowed. His name is Noah. Silence spread sharp and total. He's 7, she went on, words tumbling now that they'd started. He's smart. Too observant. He listens more than he speaks. And when he looks at people, it's like he's already decided who they are. Min-Jae closed his eyes. No, he said quietly. Yes, she replied. He's yours. The city outside his window blurred into light and shadow. Years of discipline held him upright, held his voice steady, but something beneath that structure cracked. You're certain, he said. I've never been more certain of anything, Aisha answered. He has your eyes, Min-Jae. The same ones you used to watch rooms like they were maps. Her voice faltered then, just enough to let the fear through. They're coming for us. And I can't do this alone anymore. The line stayed open, filled only with the sound of distance and breathing and the weight of something irrevocable settling into place. Min-Jae turned toward the window, toward the city that had always obeyed him. Aisha, he said, voice low but unwavering. Listen to me carefully. No one touches my son. Her breath caught at the word. Send me your location, he continued. Do not argue. Do not hesitate. I will take care of this. The call ended moments later, the screen going dark in her hand. Aisha leaned against the counter, trembling now that she allowed herself to. Down the hall, Noah shifted in his sleep and sighed, unaware that the world had just rearranged itself around him. In Seoul, Min-Jae stood very still. Son. Not an idea. Not a regret. A living consequence. For the first time in years, power was no longer enough. He reached for his jacket. Everything else could wait. Min-Jae did not arrive like a storm. He never had. Storms announced themselves. They warned people to run. Min-Jae preferred silence. In the hours after the call, the world around Aisha and Noah shifted in ways she couldn't see but could feel. The building's flickering hallway light was replaced before morning. A patrol car lingered too long at the corner, then vanished. A man who had been watching the apartment from across the street stopped appearing altogether. Aisha noticed the absence more than the presence. Danger didn't leave cleanly. Simply stopped pressing forward. Still she didn't sleep. She sat at the small kitchen table with her laptop open, pretending to work while listening to the rhythm of the building. Every sound mattered now. Every gap between sounds mattered more. Noah woke just before dawn and padded into the kitchen in his socks. Did something happen? He asked quietly. She closed the laptop. Why do you ask? It feels different, he said. Like when it rains somewhere else, but you can smell it. Aisha pulled him close and kissed his temple. You're safe, she said, hoping it was true. Across the ocean, Min-Jae stood in a windowless room beneath one of his legitimate offices. Screens lined the walls, traffic feeds, financial movements, call metadata scrolling too fast for most eyes to track. His people spoke only when spoken to. 2 watchers were subcontracted, one voice said. They've been removed. Removed how? Min-Jae asked. They won't return. He nodded once. Quietly. Always. Protection, Min-Jae knew, was never free. It demanded payment in favors, in silence, in debts that would mature later. Each move he made to shield his son tightened the web around him. He accepted that. What unsettled him was how natural the choice felt. A report appeared on the central screen. Noah Rivers. School records. Medical checkups. Drawings scanned from a classroom bulletin board. A house with 3 stick figures holding hands. One taller than the others. Min-Jae stared longer than necessary. He watches, Min-Jae said softly. Yes, his aide replied. He's observant. Teachers describe him as contained. Min-Jae exhaled through his nose. Contained. He recognized the word. Had lived inside it most of his life. Increase surveillance, Min-Jae said. But do not let them see it. And the mother. Respect her boundaries, he replied after a moment. She didn't ask for this. The aide hesitated. Sir, your involvement will be noticed. Rivals will test it. I know. And the cost. Min-Jae turned away from the screens. I'll pay it. In Atlanta, Aisha's phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. You have a window. Use it. No signature. No explanation. Her chest tightened. She looked at Noah, who was tying his sneakers with careful concentration, tongue tucked between his teeth. He glanced up, met her gaze, and smiled. Those eyes. She typed back one word. How? The response came almost immediately. Trust is the price. Aisha closed her eyes. She had run once because she refused to trust a man who lived in shadows. Now those shadows were standing between her son and the world that wanted to take him apart. She didn't like the feeling. But she recognized necessity when it stared her in the face. That night, Min-Jae sat alone in his office long after everyone else had gone. He loosened his tie, something he rarely did, and rested his forearms on the desk. Protection was supposed to be transactional. This wasn't. Every order he gave, every favor he called in, carried a weight that had nothing to do with power. Carried a name. Faith. A boy who didn't know him yet. Min-Jae looked at the city he controlled and understood something he had avoided for years. Protecting his son would cost him more than enemies. It would cost him the man he had been willing to be. And for the first time he didn't consider that a loss. They met without ceremony. No crowds. No guards in sight. No moment that announced itself as important. Aisha noticed that first, the way the street cafe blended into the city noise, the way nothing about the place suggested turning points or consequences. Just tables, chipped mugs, steam rising into cool air. Min-Jae arrived early. He chose a seat where he could see the entrance without appearing to watch it. Old habits. He folded his hands on the table and waited, forcing himself not to check the time. When Aisha appeared, Noah walking beside her, the world narrowed. Min-Jae stood before he realized he was moving. Noah stopped short. He didn't hide. He didn't cling. He simply looked. Min-Jae had faced men who wanted him dead without blinking. He had negotiated peace between enemies who trusted nothing but his word. None of that prepared him for the weight of a child's gaze. Those eyes. Not just similar. Not reminiscent. The same. Noah tilted his head slightly, studying Min-Jae with the careful curiosity of someone used to reading rooms. "You're him," he said. Min-Jae swallowed. "Yes." Aisha's breath caught. "Noah." "It's okay," Noah said, still looking at Min-Jae. "You don't look scary." Min-Jae felt something in his chest shift, subtle and violent all at once. He crouched slowly, lowering himself until they were eye level. "You're not wrong," he said. "I try not to be." Noah considered that. Then, without hesitation, he asked, "Do you watch people?" Min-Jae almost smiled. "I do," he answered honestly. "So do I," Noah said. "That's how you know what they'll do next." Aisha closed her eyes. Min-Jae nodded once. "You're very observant." Noah's mouth twitched, pleased but cautious. "Mom says I got that from her." Min-Jae glanced up at Aisha. She held his gaze for a beat, long enough to acknowledge the truth without surrendering anything else. They sat. Coffee arrived untouched. Time slowed, then stretched. Min-Jae did not reach for Noah. He did not speak too much. He listened. Noah talked about school. About a teacher who spoke too fast. About how people were louder when they were nervous. He spoke the way Min-Jae once had as a boy. Measured, deliberate, always aware of more than he said. At one point, Noah glanced at Min-Jae's hands. "They're steady," he observed. Min-Jae looked down, surprised. "They are. My hands shake sometimes," Noah admitted. "Mom says it's okay." "It is," Min-Jae said quietly. "It means you care." Noah nodded, absorbing that. When it was time to leave, Noah stood and hesitated, then did something small and devastating. He took Min-Jae's hand. Not tightly. Not desperately. Just enough to test whether it would stay. Min-Jae did not move. He let his hand remain exactly where it was, solid and present and real. Noah looked up at him one last time. "You have my eyes," he said, matter of fact. Min-Jae bent slightly, meeting his gaze. "You have mine," he corrected gently. "And that matters." As they walked away, Aisha felt it. The shift she had been dreading and expecting all at once. This was no longer a secret. It was a bond. And Min-Jae stood alone for a moment longer, watching them disappear into the city, knowing with absolute clarity that nothing he protected now could ever come before that boy. The inheritance had already begun. Trust did not arrive all at once. It moved the way winter does. Quietly, without announcement, settling into places no one had prepared for. After the cafe, there were no promises made. No declarations. No sudden closeness that pretended 7 years of absence could be erased by recognition alone. Min-Jae did not ask to see Noah again. Aisha did not offer. They let the space between them exist, fragile but intentional. That space was where trust began. Min-Jae kept his distance, but the world around them stayed subtly altered. Noah's school schedule shifted without explanation. A broken streetlight outside their building was fixed within hours. When Aisha noticed a man lingering too long near the bus stop one afternoon, he was gone the next day. Noah noticed too. "Things move when you don't look at them," he said one night as they ate dinner. Aisha paused. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Like someone's watching so I don't have to." Her chest tightened. She did not tell him who. Min-Jae watched from elsewhere. Through updates, through reports stripped of names and violence, through details that painted a picture without intruding. He learned Noah preferred quiet corners of playgrounds, that he listened to adults longer than necessary, that he disliked sudden noise but loved rain because it made the world predictable. Min-Jae recognized himself in all of it. That recognition hurt more than fear ever had. They spoke rarely. Short calls. Fewer words than either expected. When they did speak, it was never about power or protection. It was about logistics. Boundaries. Aisha set those boundaries carefully. "You don't get to disappear again," she told him once, voice steady but sharp. "And you don't get to take over." "I won't," he said. "Either." She studied him through the phone, weighing the silence between his words. He did not rush to reassure her. He did not argue. That mattered. Noah asked questions in the way children do when they already know part of the answer. "Why doesn't he come here?" he asked one evening, legs tucked beneath him on the couch. "Because sometimes caring means staying back," Aisha said. Noah considered that. "Is he afraid?" Aisha hesitated. Then, "I think he's learning." That seemed to satisfy him. When Min-Jae did see Noah again, it was brief and deliberate. Park bench. Shared snack. No lingering. No crossing lines that hadn't been invited. Noah sat beside him, swinging his legs slowly. "Mom says you don't like crowds." Min-Jae nodded. "They make it hard to hear yourself think." Noah smiled faintly. "I don't like them either." Min-Jae felt the weight of that simple alignment. He resisted the instinct to fill it with words. Instead he stayed. That was harder. Trust grew not through protection alone, but through restraint. Through the moments Min-Jae chose not to interfere. Through the times Aisha allowed Noah to decide whether to wave, whether to speak, whether to close the distance himself. And Noah did, inch by inch. One afternoon, without looking at him, Noah said, "You don't feel like the bad guys in my stories." Min-Jae's throat tightened. "What do I feel like?" Noah thought for a long time. "Like someone who's standing very still so he doesn't scare anyone." Min-Jae nodded once, accepting the truth of it. Trust, he realized, was not built by proving strength. It was built by proving you could be gentle without being asked. And slowly, so slowly it almost hurt, they were learning how to stand in the same space without reaching too fast for what could still break. The first sign was small enough to be dismissed. Noah came home quiet one afternoon, backpack heavier than usual, shoulders tight. He sat at the kitchen table and traced the grain of the wood with his finger, eyes fixed somewhere just past the wall. Aisha noticed. She always did. "Did something happen at school?" she asked. Noah shrugged. "Someone was waiting outside." Her hand stilled. "Who?" "I don't know." He hesitated. "He knew my name." The room seemed to tilt. Aisha knelt in front of him, careful to keep her voice level. "What did he say?" "That my dad had nice suits," Noah said. "And that I'd grow into them." Aisha's pulse hammered, but she forced a smile. "And what did you do?" "I didn't answer," Noah said. "You said I don't owe strangers anything." She pulled him into her arms and held him until his breathing evened out. Only then did she reach for her phone. The message arrived before she could type. This wasn't supposed to happen. Min-Jae was already standing when the call connected. "Where?" he asked. "Outside his school," Aisha said. "A man who knew too much." Min-Jae closed his eyes once. Single breath. Controlled. Then the anger settled. Not loud, not reckless. Focused. "My world moved where it shouldn't have," he said. I'm fixing it. No, Aisha replied, sharp now. You're ending it. Or it ends us. Silence stretched between them, heavy with the truth neither had wanted to name. That night, Noah dreamed of doors that wouldn't close. He woke before dawn, heart racing, and padded down the hall. Aisha found him sitting on the couch, knees pulled to his chest, staring at the window. He was watching again, Noah whispered. Aisha followed his gaze. Nothing there. Nothing visible. Min-Jae felt the breach before the report reached him. A whisper in the wrong channel. A name used without permission. Test. The Empire had noticed the boy. And empires, once aware of leverage, did not forget. He convened no meeting. Issued no sweeping orders. He went to the place beneath the place. The quiet room where only truths were spoken. Who knew, he asked. A list appeared. Shorter than it should have been. Longer than it needed to be. Containment failed, someone said carefully. Min-Jae nodded. Then containment ends. He thought of Noah's hands, careful with objects. Of the way the boy listened before speaking. Of eyes that assessed risk instinctively. Not learned. Inherited. That realization sharpened the edge of his decision. By morning, Aisha's phone buzzed with instructions that sounded like options but were not. Routes changed. Schedules adjusted. A move that had been coming anyway. She packed without comment. Noah watched from the doorway, small face serious. Is it because of me? Aisha crossed the room and took his hands. No. It's because of people who don't understand what matters. He nodded, absorbing that in his own way. Is he mad? She thought of Min-Jae's voice. Steady, restrained, carrying something close to fear. No, she said. He's choosing. They left before the sun rose. The city still pretending nothing had shifted. Somewhere behind them, Min-Jae stood at a window and understood the cost at last. His world had touched his sun. That was the line. And it would not be crossed again, even if it meant pulling the empire apart with his own hands. Min-Jae had always believed enemies announced themselves. They challenged you openly, circled from the outside, tested your defenses until something gave. He knew how to deal with those men. He had built his life around it. This enemy did none of that. It waited in silence. He stood alone in the room where decisions were usually made without hesitation. Screens glowed softly, feeding him information he no longer wanted. Routes secured, assets mobilized, risks neutralized. The machine was still efficient, still loyal, still dangerous. All of it existed because he had allowed it to. Min-Jae closed his eyes and saw Noah's face instead. The careful way the boy watched the world. The pause before every word. The instinct to assess danger before trusting warmth. Those weren't traits learned at school. They were survival instincts. Inherited ones. Min-Jae had spent years convincing himself that distance was mercy. That by keeping his world contained, he protected anyone foolish enough to love him. Power required sacrifice, and sacrifice required isolation. It had all made sense until it had a face. Until that face looked back at him and didn't flinch. A message blinked onto the screen. Situation contained. No further exposure. Contained. The word tasted wrong now. Min-Jae leaned forward, resting his palms against the table. He remembered being Noah's age, standing in a narrow apartment, listening to men argue in low voices about money and fear. He remembered learning early that stillness kept you alive. He had sworn he would never pass that lesson on. Yet, if he continued as he was, Noah would grow up watched, measured, protected by systems built to destroy other people's sons. He would inherit not just eyes but consequences. That was the legacy waiting for him. Min-Jae straightened. Prepare a full audit, he said into the quiet. All operations. All channels. Sir. Everything, he repeated. I want to see where the rot begins. It would cost him allies. It would fracture loyalties carefully maintained for decades. Men who had prospered under his shadow would resist. Some would not forgive him for turning inward. He accepted that. Later, when he spoke to Aisha, she heard the change immediately. "You sound tired," she said. "I am," he replied. "But I'm clear." She waited. "I won't let my world touch him again," Min-Jae said. "Not indirectly. Not eventually. Not at all." "And how do you plan to do that?" she asked. He exhaled. "By dismantling the parts of it that make him a target." Silence followed. Not disbelief, but recognition. "That's not something you can half do," Aisha said carefully. "I know." She glanced at Noah sitting nearby, focused on a book, brow furrowed in concentration. "He doesn't need a kingdom," she said. "He needs a father who comes home." Min-Jae closed his eyes. 4 years power had defined him. It had given him purpose, identity, survival. Letting it go felt like stepping into open air without armor. But for the first time, the fear did not stop him. "I don't want him to grow up learning how to disappear," Min-Jae said quietly. "I want him to learn how to stay." That night, Noah asked a question without looking up from his book. "Are you going to leave again?" Min-Jae knelt in front of him, slow and deliberate, making sure his presence did not overwhelm. "No," he said. "Not if I can help it." Noah considered that. "Then you might have to change some things." Min-Jae nodded. "I already am." And in that moment, he understood the truth he had been avoiding his entire life. His greatest enemy had never been rivals or violence or betrayal. It had been the man he kept choosing to be. That choice was over. The dismantling did not look like collapse. There were no headlines, no sudden violence, no single night where everything burned. It happened the way Min-Jae had always done things, quietly, deliberately, without spectacle. Counts closed, routes rerouted and then erased. Men who had built their loyalty on fear found themselves without access, without authority, without the sense of inevitability that had once protected them. Some resisted. Some vanished into obscurity. A few understood exactly what was happening and chose not to stand in the way. Min-Jae let them go. Power, he had learned, was loud when it was insecure. This was not that. For the first time since Noah had been born, Min-Jae slept without one eye open. Not because the world was suddenly safe, but because he had chosen which part of it mattered. Aisha watched the change with careful attention. She did not celebrate it. She did not trust it blindly either. But she noticed the difference in the way Min-Jae showed up. On time, unguarded. Present even when the conversations were uncomfortable. Noah noticed first. "You don't look like you're listening to 5 things at once anymore," he said one afternoon as they sat on the floor, working through a puzzle together. Min-Jae smiled faintly. "Just one now." Noah nodded, approving. "That's better." They moved to a smaller place, one without gates or cameras visible from the street. It wasn't anonymous, but it was human. Mornings came with ordinary sounds. Traffic, voices, birds arguing over nothing important. Min-Jae learned how to exist inside that noise. He walked Noah to school sometimes, hands in his coat pockets, eyes scanning less and less each week. He learned which questions Noah asked when he was nervous and which ones meant he was thinking ahead. He learned that his son needed space to decide when closeness was safe. So he waited. That waiting became his new discipline. On the last night before Min-Jae closed the final channel of the empire that had once defined him, he stood alone on the balcony and watched the city breathe. Aisha joined him, quiet as ever. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He thought of the men who would never forgive him. The reach he had surrendered. The fear he no longer commanded. Then he thought of Noah asleep down the hall, one arm flung across his pillow, face relaxed in a way it never had been before. "No," Min-Jae said. "I regret waiting so long to understand what mattered." Aisha studied him, then nodded once. "That might be the first honest thing you've ever said to me." He accepted that. Later, Noah stood in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Are you coming to bed?" Min-Jae turned, surprised by how easily the word landed in his chest. "Yes," he said. "I am." Noah hesitated, then stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Min-Jae's waist. "Not tight. Not afraid. Just certain." Min-Jae rested his hand on his son's back and felt the weight of everything he had let go, and everything he had chosen instead. He had not given Noah an empire. He had given him something rarer. A future that did not require watching over his shoulder. A life where inherited eyes could learn to see more than danger. And as Min-Jae turned off the lights and followed his son down the hall, he understood what a father truly leaves behind. Not power, not fear, but the freedom to grow without shadows.